The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When the Pharisees, with some scribes who had come from Jerusalem, gathered around Jesus, they observed that some of his disciples ate their meals with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees, and in fact all Jews, do not eat without carefully washing their hands, keeping the tradition of the elders. And on coming from the marketplace, they do not eat without purifying themselves. And there are many other things that they have traditionally observed, purification of cups and jugs and kettles and beds. So the Pharisees and scribes questioned him, "Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat a meal with unclean hands?" He responded, "Well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines human precepts.' You disregard God's commandment, but cling to human tradition." He went on to say, "How well you have set aside the commandment of God in order to uphold your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother, and whoever curses father or mother shall die.' Yet you say, if someone says to father or mother, 'Any support you might have had from me is korban,' meaning dedicated to God, you allow him to do nothing more for his father or mother. You nullify the word of God in favor of your tradition that you have handed on, and you do many such things." The Gospel of the Lord. The last 2 days we've been reading through these famous first lines of the book of Genesis, and I just wanted to point out a couple of things to us. And some of these things you may have heard if you've done Bible studies on Genesis, but there's a couple of important things to talk about here. First of all, the structure of chapter 1 here in the book of Genesis, of the 6 days of creation, culminating with the seventh day rest of God. We are to understand that the scene is set at the very beginning when it says God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness covered the abyss. It's a Hebrew way of saying that there was nothing. There was neither form nor void to the world. And so, God, in the first 3 days, He creates a form for the world. He creates time. He creates the heavens. He creates the earth. And then on the second 3 days of creation, He fills each of those spaces. So He fills time with the sun and the moon. He fills the earth with creatures walking on the ground. And He fills the sky with all of the birds that swim that are in the sky, and also all water creatures. There's a symmetry that is shown there in those first lines of Genesis. And the creation story happens over the course of 6 days, culminating in a seventh day. This is significant because in the ancient Near Eastern world, in the world that Moses was living in as he was writing these words of the book of Genesis, it was very common in that part of the world to understand that temples would be built in 7 days. There's a tradition that if you were building a temple in the ancient world, you would build it over the course of 7 days. And so the fact that in the book of Genesis here, creation takes place over the course of 7 days, the writer is trying to point that out, that God is creating the whole cosmos, the heavens and the earth, as a temple. We've talked about this before. That's why in the Old Testament, sometimes the temple itself is referred to as the heavens and the earth. It's also why King Solomon, when he built the temple in Jerusalem, he built it over the course of 7 years, and culminating with a 7-day feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. And on the 7th day, he consecrated the temple. The number 7 came up over and over again, even with the building of the temple. So again, what Genesis is pointing out here is that God isn't just creating the world, He's creating His temple. The whole cosmos is God's temple. And in Jerusalem, when they built the temple years later on, that temple is a microcosm of the universe. Now, this culminates with God's rest on the Sabbath day. What was the point of God resting on the Sabbath day? Was He tired? Was he exhausted? No, it was intentional. The reason why he rested on the seventh day is because of what he did on the sixth day. On the sixth day, he created man in his own image. In the divine image, he created them. Male and female, he created them, showing that humanity is the culmination of all creation. Nothing is more important than mankind in this creation of God. And God explicitly made the seventh day, it's not just that he rested, he made it holy. Holy for all mankind to be with God on the seventh day. Now, a common question that comes up in the story of Genesis is, what about this line about being created in God's image? God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Typically, when we read the Old Testament, we think of God as just a singular person. And yet here, he says, "Let us make man in our image." It's one of those times in the Old Testament where we see the future revelation of the Trinity lying hidden here in the book of Genesis. Although that hasn't always been the interpretation. Sometimes ancient Jewish rabbis, they said that our image, God, referring to the plural there, was referring to the angels. That God created the world through the multitude of angels. But the early church fathers and church theologians all throughout the ages since then have taken that other interpretation. This is a revealing of the Trinity there in the beginning. Especially when you talk about being created, God created man in his image. In the divine image, he created them, male and female. He created them. So we hear God speaking about the image of mankind, and as he describes that image, he describes it as male and female, two persons, a relationship. So even in the book of Genesis, we see that what it means to be created in the image of God, in a certain sense, that means to be created for relationship, just as God himself is a relationship of persons.